Force. We have the lead elements, which are led by France. We have the United States, which has assigned thousands of troops to the NATO Response Force, and these will be deployed to different places in the eastern part of the lines. Well, they are partly coming from the United States, but these are also very much European troops. For instance, the lead element, the VJTF, the High Readiness Joint Task Force, is now led by France. There's a strong German component there, and other allies also part of that.
Associated Press.
Lorne Cook, Associated Press. Just to follow up on that, Secretary General, the VJTF can only go to one place, and you have 8 allies that are extremely nervous. I mean, where might you send it? Have you identified a particular weakness on that eastern flank? Thank you.
But I think we have to understand that we have many elements, components of the NATO Response Force. We have increased the readiness of the NATO Response Force, and then I don't speak only about the lead element or the VJTF, the very
You getting ready for invasion? Is that why you're doing this working out? For when Putin comes to your house? Steal your potatoes?
that we are deploying the whole force. The size of the NATO Response Force has been tripled since 2014 to roughly 40,000 troops. I'm not saying we're deploying the whole thing. I'm saying that we are deploying elements of the lead, also the VJTF, and elements of the rest of the NATO Response Force. And then it is for SACEUR to make fine decisions exactly on where the different elements are deployed. But we activated the defense plans yesterday, and now.
Y'all are closer than I am.
Lady in white over there.
Thanks, Elin Sørsdal.
I welcome the end of the world. I don't care anymore. Why should I care? I'm a worthless cripple.
How quick can these troops and this force be deployed?
But some of these forces are already operating because we have sea and air forces, which are also already part of the NATO maritime forces operating from the Barents Sea down to the Mediterranean. Some are air forces, the air component of the NATO Response Force. And then some of the land forces are also can move within a few days because they're part of.
If the world ends, I'll be dead, so it doesn't matter if I'll be able to eat McDonald's or not, will it? We're not as dependent on Russia for anything like the rest of Europe is. I don't know how bad. I know Germany apparently is real dependent on them for like oil and shit like that. Like we cut deals with the Arabs for that shit, not the Russians. So, you know, as long as we don't have to like fight Saudi Arabia or some shit, we'll be all right. I mean, obviously the market will go up, but still, not as bad. I heard that like 30 to 50% of all like German like, you know, natural gas and oil comes from there.
Under the Act. Does that mean that NATO now considers the NATO-Russia Founding Act as obsolete, or do NATO member states are they still bound? Do they still feel bound by this document? Thanks a lot.
The NATO leaders decided today a statement where we clearly state the fact that Russia has walked away. The NATO-Russia Founding Act is based on some core principles enshrined in the Founding Act, and that is the respect for territorial integrity and sovereignty.
I'm not an expert on Russia or Ukraine or the shitty-ass Europe.
in Donbass. And this is further violated with the full-fledged invasion of Ukraine that we have seen over the last couple of days. So what we see is that Russia show no respect for the NATO-Russia Founding Act. And of course, if you have a founding act between two partners, NATO and Russia, and one part doesn't respect.
Why has it got everything to do with America? Like, there's no other country that has any onus up to this. Like, what about all the countries that are in Europe, right? Maybe that's the problem. Maybe everybody shouldn't expect America to do every fucking thing. I think we all fucked up when we ended, like, we don't finish shit no more. It's almost hard to, though. Like, it's not like we could really finish Russia or any of these countries off if we wanted to anymore, because they all have nuclear weapons, right? And basically, if one nuclear weapon goes off, I think we're all pretty much, mostly fucked, right? So, when before they had them, we should have finished off Russia, but after World War II, we were basically fucked. The rest of Europe was fucked, so we were just glad to get rid of Hitler. So we basically said, here, take this side, deal with it, right? And then, of course, Russia used communism and socialism, and they ran their country into the ground, right? And then when they were weakened in the 90s, then we tried to befriend them, sort of. But then Putin came in there, and he's just wanted to rebuild all this shit, and then he's so crooked, So I don't know. It's why we never won in Afghanistan or any of these other countries. We were too worried about shit. We didn't take nobody out like we could have. We were worried about building a country. There's all kinds of guarantees. There were guarantees when Ukraine gave up their nukes back to Russia that, Russia wouldn't fuck with them, and that obviously didn't go through too. So I think that's why Ukraine was wanting to get into NATO, right? I think he was scared. Well, yeah, he was scared that they would, because, like, once NATO, because the way that, I don't know what it is, there's some sort of article. If somebody attacks one NATO country, then technically that's like attacking all of them. So Putin knows, like, if I'm ever going to try to do something to Ukraine, whatever, take it over fully, or use his bullshit excuse of, like, the Nazis or whatever that are there, he got to do it before they join, because once that happens, it's definitely going to be a lot hairier than it is now. Because basically right now, honestly, they're on it, Yeah, so I guess we backing out too. Wasn't it UK and America? But wasn't Russia also, like, it was something, I don't know, what was it? Some sort of what was it? Was it Bulgarian memorandum or something? I can't remember the name of it. I was going to look at the specifics of it. Budapest memorandum. Okay, that's what it was called. I think they got fucked by everybody, basically. 20 years ago, Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons in exchange for security guarantees from Russia and the West. Today, Kyiv feels betrayed, and not merely by Moscow. December 94. It gave up its nukes in exchange for security guarantees. The U.S., Great Britain, and Russia welcomed the decision of Kyiv regime to accede to the Non-Proliferation Agreement and pledged, among other things, to respect the independence and existing borders of Ukraine. The Soviet Union, Belarus, Kazakhstan signed similar memoranda on the same day. It says at that point, Ukraine had the third largest arsenal of nuclear weapons in the world after the United States. So no wonder they wanted to give them up. But they didn't seem like they had much choice. What they're saying, like they didn't have the stuff to like actually do anything with them. But obviously, it was still something. So yeah, they kind of just got fucked by everybody, realistically.
NATO, one for all for one, an attack on one ally will be regarded as an attack on all, then no ally will be attacked. And that will prevent the conflict. And that will preserve peace for NATO allies and for 1 billion people. And that's the reason why we communicate so clearly, and that's the reason why we are deploying more troops in the eastern part of the alliance, to make sure that there is no possibility to misunderstand our readiness to protect and defend all allies. And again, this is to preserve peace, to prevent an attack, and to prevent that the war which is going on in Ukraine spill over to any NATO allied country.
Well, Russia don't want to do that either. I don't know. I saw something. I don't know how true it is. I didn't double check. I can't remember. I saw it somewhere. Supposedly, Russia accidentally shot a Turkish ship or something in the Black Sea. I don't know if that's true or not, but if that's the case, then I don't know. There might, because I think Turkey's in NATO, right? But like, I think it would take more than that. I think we wouldn't want to go to war over that, unfortunately. I wonder, I mean, at the end of the day, are the sanctions and shit they're proposing, are they really gonna, Biden made it sound like they're like gonna devastate, Russia, right? Like, but at the end of the day, are they really, or is there some other ways around this? Is it gonna be enough, if he was willing to go in and do what he did already, is that really gonna stop Putin? I don't know. Irish eat potatoes and fuck sheep. So there you go. I did read something where I think Germany may be getting on board with that. They weren't before because of obvious reasons, right? They act like they say the strongest military alliance. Guess what? If America wasn't in NATO and it was just Russia versus like the rest of Europe, guess what? It wouldn't be the strongest alliance, right? You know? And if China joins up with Russia, then we're all fucked. But I don't know. I don't think China's that crazy yet. But it does give them a precedent to go after Taiwan, so well, yeah, like they were planning all this shit for a while, right? And everybody's like, "No, they're not gonna do nothing. They're not gonna do nothing." Like he spread all them. I remember they were talking about these troops for a long, long time, right? And you know, and I think also because it came in for some of it from Belarus, like they were doing like war drills with them. So I think that was another way to set that up. Like, oh, we're just up here, you know. I don't know why. Well, fuck it. If we're doing all this, well, yeah, I know, but I'm just saying that's kind of what he was doing. Like if he was doing that to prepare, then he would, like you said, he was doing other shit to prepare. That's all I'm saying. Like I believe what you're saying. Like I don't know specifically. Well, that's I agree. It was posturing also. And then I told someone else. I said I think some of it's posturing, and they're like, so you don't think they'll invade? And I'm like, just because they're posturing, you can posture then invade, right? Or you can posture and not invade. It can you can bluff and still go through with something. That doesn't mean that it was like, you know, I would have figured he was probably more likely that he was going to do this. He was kind of building it up, and then obviously they got the propaganda. They're trying to use it that they're the Donbass region. They're trying to stop. That's why they're really going in there. When I don't think anybody believes that shit, right? Like, I don't think anybody believes it. Like, any country in the world believes that, except for, like, you know, Russia and, like, maybe, like, Belarus or some shit, right? No non-allied, like, country. I don't even. I think China's been kind of neutral. Although I did see something where they said maybe uh, they didn't condemn it or something. I don't know. A gang of drug addicts. Like, I don't know. America, if this is the thing, man, we should just go ahead and take over Canada at this point and say fuck it. Or Mexico. I don't know what's in Mexico we want though. I don't know. Or go to, I guess some of South American countries have got some oil and shit. We'll just annex. We're gonna annex South America. Yeah, I mean that might have been part. That might have been like an option, right? Like maybe, but maybe at some point he didn't think that. Maybe he didn't think they were going to do it, so then he calculated this was what was going to make the most sense to him. I don't know. I don't think it makes any sense. Not in the way the world works these days, but we'll have to wait and see how it plays out. The thing is, I couldn't tell you who's in charge of your shitty ass country, but everybody else in the world could tell who's in charge of our country. Good or bad. I just find that hilarious. And who do they all call? Like nobody calling the fucking nobody's calling the president of, you know, Romania. They're calling the president of the United States when there's shit going down. I just hope he isn't insane enough to, because he did, like, I don't know, did you see that speech? He did say some shit where he was like, he might have been obviously bluffing too, but he was like bolstering that, like, this is a bit of, if y'all try to do anything to stop us, we're gonna like put the fucking hammer down, you know. So that part's a little bit eerie. Like, you know, obviously I'm not predicting that he's going to literally use nuclear weapons. I'm sure if like the U.S. troops went in there or fighting them one on one, that might change shit. But
first of all, we understand that Vladimir Zelensky called, wanted talks with Moscow. Vladimir Putin.
How do you do? I don't know. How can you even talk to Putin at this point, though? Like, I don't know. I guess like you gotta keep in mind some concept of trying to do some diplomacy. But after what's happened, like, I don't know. Like, can you even talk to him?
No, we want to have the talks in Warsaw, and then Moscow says communications between the two sides have been cut, or they've not been able to hear back from the Ukrainians since then. And we're also hearing from the Israeli broadcasting corporation that Vladimir Zelensky actually asked Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett to mediate, to talk to the Russians about the possibility of talks, although we've had no official confirmation from the Israelis about that.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of out of control. Like, I don't know. That's how I kind of see it, so I don't know. So it almost seems like desperation on his part, like a last gasp chance, you know? But, I mean, he got away with this shit before. Like, so maybe he also is calculating, like, at the end of the day, when he did the shit in Crimea, they didn't do shit, right?
This is the Ukrainian government headed by Vladimir Zelensky, who won a 73% share of the vote in elections in 2019. The Kremlin's problem, Vladimir Putin's problem, is specifically with Zelensky. How they get around that for talks, we don't know.
All right, thank you so much. Bernard Smith reporting from Moscow. Let's cross over to Ukraine and the Ukrainian city of Dnipro specifically. Charles Stratford is joining us from there. Charles, what are you seeing on the ground where you are? All right, I do apologize. Charles, if you can hear.
Charles can't hear you. Oh yeah, I mean, it's nothing's one thing. Clearly, I mean, I don't agree. I don't agree with that at all. I mean, but I mean, is there some, like, there got to be like one thing that pushes you over to the edge, though, you know? It's like to go and commit like a war. A lot of people are calling him like this is what I'm saying. Like I don't know how this is all going to end in the end, right? But like they're calling for Putin to be a war criminal and all this shit right now for this. So does that mean that is he gonna have like a downfall regardless of what happens? I never get why these people get so greedy. You were the richest, like there's any speculation that he's richer than some of the richest people in the world because of he's basically cheated and stole so much shit over all these years in Russia, right? What like I would just be like fuck it, I'm done, I'm retiring, I'll go live somewhere like be living a lap of luxury. But I guess some people like the power and the control is so much more important to them. I don't know, I guess none of that shit ever applies to me. I get wanting to be rich, I don't get wanting to be in charge of everybody, aside from using that to get rich. But yeah, I mean, like, they're not gonna go in straight. Like, that's it. At worst case scenario, like he can do what they said he was trying to do with Israel, maybe even India, where they could talk to Russia like by proxy or something. You know what I'm saying? Um, or and we do like the economic sanctions and shit like that, right? But like, yeah, just some straight up. We're not sending any troops, not unless something super. Like, I don't even know what it would take. It would have to be some. They would have to like move past. They would have to like move past Ukraine into like Poland or something like that.
And the top military commanders in Russia are still open. Literally phone lines. General Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs in America, is able, as of last night, was able to pick up the phone and speak to his counterpart in Moscow. That's important because at a military level, that is one way, the key way of stopping any inadvertent confrontation between the West, between NATO troops and between Russia.
No, I mean, I'm sure it's all complicated too. I don't know enough about all the I mean, like you got to understand. I don't know how it was over there, but like over here, like when I was a kid and like even earlier growing up, like I know like the Soviet Union fell like in '91, but like it was always like the Russia's evil, the communist devil, blah 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 blah. So like it's always been that way, and not always, but like in my lifetime, it kind of eased at certain points. But so like everything, very, very biased over here from,
Last hour or so, I can tell you what they are trying to do is ensure as much support as they can to isolate Russia at that top body, that top diplomatic message that Beijing is not happy with what the Kremlin is doing. And in the last few moments, we've heard from Russia, from Moscow, that President Putin has spoken in the last few minutes to President Xi Jinping of China. I'd love to know how that conversation went.
Wouldn't we all? I wonder, like, I don't know, I guess they have to. What's up, Robert? I don't know. I still don't know how. Like, I think they're gonna be curiously optimistic because they want to see how, because they're even more isolated. Because I don't think there's any kind of NATO countries or nothing like that. Nothing like that going to be even nowhere near Asia. So, hopefully he's not as bad as you. Hopefully, Robert, you're a little bit better off than him. I don't know if I'd want to be associated with him and that kind of thing, but that's just me. A stupid American, since America's horrible. But let's just get it off the bat.
The Russian bombardment has caused devastation in this city, forcing terrified residents to spend last night in underground shelters.
my mom and me, we spent like almost 12 hours in the underground together with other people.
Points like that, I feel it's
to the point, Aaron, where we are actually importing an average of 22 million barrels a day, or rather a month, from Russia. So we are actually helping to finance his war machine going into Ukraine, which makes absolutely no sense. Energy independence for Europe and the United States is critical.
Monica Crowley, former Assistant Secretary of the Treasury, we appreciate your perspective today. Thank you.
Now to the other major breaking news we're following
Hello.
this hour. President Biden has made
Thanks
his
for
pick for the
following.
Supreme Court. Biden is expected to nominate federal judge Ketanji Brown Jackson.
They're
to
talking
fill
about
Justice
other stuff now. Was that not a live feed? No, that was a video. My bad. I thought I had a live feed on. We can show some CNN if they're not. Oh, they're on commercial right now, but. Now I'm just curious to talk about stuff and see how everybody else is doing with it. Are you saying like you saw like what, like you talking about on the news or something over there? Or you mean like you literally saw like you were in the Ukraine? Mostly. Yeah. You're from Russia? What is your opinion on like I've seen a lot of people well maybe not a lot, but I've seen people that were protesting or whatever against the war. Are you pro or against it, or you know, what's going on? Because I know, obviously, I know not everybody in the country supports everything that their government does. Some people think that way, but that's not the case. Why do you support the war? Any particular reason? You believe the about the Nazis or whatever? Am I all right in the head? Why does nobody else seem to think that that's going on? I don't know. Obviously, I don't know. Like, I'm just going off what a lot of other countries doesn't think that any of that's going on. And obviously, you know, you're some person on the internet, I'm some person on the internet, so who knows who's what or where, you know? Like, was there no other way of like, you know, because if that was the case, obviously I wouldn't support like Ukraine doing all that, right? But is it like
conversation because it's the first time that they have spoken since the early hours of that Russian attack on Ukraine Wednesday night, when after Russia started this physical assault, President Biden got on the phone with President Zelensky, where he asked the U.S. president to help rally international support behind Ukraine in this time. And now they've just spoken again. We have not gotten details on it beyond the timing.
I mean, that's possible. I don't know. Like, I'm just saying, like, was there no way, like, besides, like, you know, they couldn't have gone with something else, you know, before they would have went to, like, actually going in there? Like, I mean, if the stuff's true, then there should be evidence of it. Like, I don't know, there was, like, what I was hearing was, like, they were basically saying they're genociding, so there would be, like, thousands and thousands of bodies and stuff. Like, they would be able to prove that this happened. So I don't know why like, Russia couldn't have went to somewhere else and got, like, more people behind it, you know? Like, people that, like, they could have went to, like, countries that are more, you know, on their side. Like, they went, like, like, in, like, some fighting. I mean, I would have to, like, I wouldn't know necessarily whether or not those photos were what you say they are. I don't have enough information to know if those are. Like, I'm saying, like, if they brought in, like, people, like, United Nations people, they come in and they investigate, like, things like this. This is what they did. This is how, like, Milosevic and stuff, how they got caught back. They went into, like, and seen the ethnic cleansing and stuff like that. They could, like, they took people in and investigated it. Me seeing a picture you show me doesn't mean that I'm going to necessarily believe that or not, you know? Steven Seagal, is he on the, we didn't get to hear from
Let me
him.
get to you first. Take us behind the scenes. Tell us about your reporting about how the president came to this decision.
Well, Dana, we know that President Biden has been thinking about this for a very long time, and he actually met for an interview earlier this month with Judge Jackson, but offered her the job just last evening. In a brief telephone call, he extended the offer, and she accepted it, we're told. But then this morning, she appeared at her day job, at a routine.
Oh, now they're talking about other stuff.
People fight. They will defy Russian control of Ukraine. So much as Americans have learned over the last 20 years that it is one thing to
What is I searched OBCE, like, and a bunch of other shit came up for me. Like, what does it stand for? Because when I searched OBCE, I got a Oregon Board of Chiropractic Examiners. Is this like some, like, independent thing that went and investigated this, or is this like a Russian thing that went and investigated it? I don't know. Like, I mean, is it possible that Ukraine is attacking, like, predominantly Russian region of, you know, Ukraine? It's not impossible. I'm just saying, like, if it was going on, I would think more people would know about it besides, like, the Russian propaganda machine, you know? I mean, this person, like, I mean, I guess they could be on here. Is your OBCE is European? Okay. Do anybody know what OBCE stands for? Like, when I Google search it, this is what comes up. I just searched OBCE. It's always wanting to be like chiropractor stuff, like OBCE Europe. Maybe that'll help. I don't know. Organization for there's OSCE. Maybe it's a different. That's it. Oh. Well, we can contact this guy in Ukraine if we wanted to. Does that know what this is? Social monitoring mission to Ukraine. Yeah. The facts. Okay, let's read this, assuming this is, Why did the OCE send a special monitoring mission to the Ukraine? Peace and stability, mission deployed, requests by the Ukraine's government. What does the mission consist of? Mandate, and then the mission, The mission is also a number of hubs. Work now, and that would be in Donbass, right? Donetsk and Luhansk. I don't know if I'm saying that right. The mission deployed in 2014. Well, they didn't really give. They didn't really. That just kind of tells what they were doing. They didn't really give any specifics. No, he's not saying that. He's saying that like he supports the war because he knows people in Donbass, I guess, that have been attacked by the Ukrainians. So he feels, I guess, that it's justified. I'm just trying to look and see, because my thing is just because you said that or whatever doesn't mean that it's true. So I was trying to look in to see if there was some sort of like committee that's came out. You can put a link in the chat. I'll be suspicious of it depending on where it links to though. I don't have links broke. I don't have them blocked. So you can send a link. I don't guarantee I'll open it on stream. I have to make sure that it's okay. It don't let you send it. Maybe I have it set where you can't. I thought I didn't have that set like that. Settings, stream, mature content, store best purpose. Permission, you can manage raids, drops, people should stream to your channel. I thought I had it where you could post links, because I think some people block it. Channel, moderation maybe, ban evasion. Oh, okay. All right, I turned it off. Maybe you can post it now. Like I said, we'll see. I thought I didn't have it on, but apparently I did. All right, I see. Well, it's the same website I'm already on, so. Is this what you're talking about? These like ceasefire violations or whatever? Yeah, I got the link. Who used to be of the people? I mean, I'm not. I mean, I'm just saying, are they? Okay, that's one thing, right? Like that happens. Or but are these people they're fighting against them? They're fighting against the normal Ukraine people, right? I would imagine if I just started saying like I don't want to be part of the USA and I started shooting at people. Like I don't know. I think Putin's putting it up there that it's like genocide and stuff like that. Like I think that I don't if that was the case, it would be a different story. Just because I'm entertaining the idea because I don't know doesn't mean that I agree with this guy. I assume it's a guy. I guess Yuri is a guy name, right? I thought you liked McDonald's. You're always talking about how much you love eating it. I'm terrible, Robert. How are you? Damn, it's shit on the white background. I can't read any of it. Well, how does it lower IQ and it improves people? Do they actually have Burger King over there? Hmm. Okay. I guess I never denied that there was possible hostility going on in Donbass, and because I knew there was some sort of, I guess the Ukraine, they would consider the separatists or whatever, they would consider them terrorists or whatever. Because I mean, I'll admit I had never heard nothing about this until recently, but obviously I live in America, right? Then we don't really give a shit about the rest of the world in general, so. White Castle's not very good. I prefer Crystals. I guess it's the rest of the world must not see it that way though. Like they see, like I see what you're saying. Like if this is, I see, like assuming this OSCE is a legitimate thing. I don't know necessarily why it isn't, but I know, it's a surprise, isn't it? I didn't know. I just learned that yesterday. There was other countries besides USA. But yeah, so I don't know. I guess it's not impossible. I don't know. It just seems like
Just arrived, and the people standing here have just arrived from Kyiv. You mentioned things are late. Well, this train is well over 6 hours late. The reason we can't go talk to people is because they still have to go through further passport controls. On the Polish side, we understand that the delays are when they have to go through the exit stamp process.
oh, they're trying to get into your country.
Ukrainians are being extra careful about who they let out of the country because they don't want anybody, but any men between 18 and 60 to leave. I did meet a Ukrainian man who's 25 years old today. He lives here in Poland, and he's here to greet some of his family members. And I asked him if he would.
Wouldn't you be running? Would you be running away if you were in Ukraine?
I will if they get worse. Here's why.
Yes, I will go and fight, and I'm ready to die for my land, for future of my kind, of my kids.
I guess on any, there's always like two sides to everything, right? You know, I think that's a problem. Like, you would think we could come to a better conclusion than having to kill each other, but you know.
Life and death of my country, my freedom. Yes, I will go.
And what's really remarkable, Aaron, is that once this ordeal is over for these people, they'll go into the main station where they will be greeted by a small army of firefighters that's there with food and water. There are also plenty of volunteers.
Why don't you eat McDonald's?
Housing and resources to make sure that they have a warm and safe place to stay for however long they're in Poland for, Aaron.
Look, it's pretty bad when you got to run from a country and you run to Poland. I mean, that's pretty rough.
Taking 30 hours to make that drive instead of 10. People literally running out of gas. We've heard those stories along the sides of the road. That's what's happening here is you have this massive surge of people. And I think it is safe to say it is just beginning. And Russian troops are now holding staff hostage at Chernobyl. That, of course, is the site of the world's worst nuclear.
What staff did they have? I thought it was pretty much abandoned, right? I guess they had to be some people monitoring or something, but I didn't know there were like actual staff at Chernobyl.
America has spoken. Dog is the #1.
Yeah, this is what we care about in America.
It's the uplifting story we need right now.
Looks like a good movie, yeah.
Dog, rated PG-13, now playing in theaters everywhere.
Lakers select Magic Johnson.
I don't know why basketball can't feel like that.
It's going to be exciting. What do you want for your future? Everything.
Well, I think there's rumor that we're letting shit go on, like something Saudi Arabia is doing or something. I don't know enough about it, honestly. I think you got me confused. I don't care about America. I'm hoping for World War III, honestly. I'm ready. I'm ready to go. I got my own issues. If I'm gonna die anyway, might as well go out in a blaze of glory. That's how I see it. Maybe that's what's going on too with everybody. I don't know. The whole world's just kind of fucked in general. Yeah, CNN, that's like the American News Network. I don't know if y'all can, I don't know if they have a CNN stream on. I had to like link my cable company so I could, my TV company to it so I could watch CNN. I know I got Al Jazeera and I tried to see if I could find some Russian channels, but I couldn't. Not that I could understand them though.
Walker has more from London.
This is
Beyond
Al
the sanctions
Jazeera.
announced comprehensively yesterday, I think it's fair to say there's a degree of soul searching amongst political leaders here in the UK. Of course,
Hold up.
we're seeing.
What? We'll make it work. I gotta go. You think China's gonna take over Russia then? Here, I might come back. I'll leave the stream on if anybody wants to watch American news. See what they're saying over here. But I gotta go do something.
Russia's assault on Ukraine is leading to the type of destruction in a European capital that we haven't seen in decades, almost a century. Some 80 miles north of Ukraine's capital, Russian forces have seized control of the Chernobyl power plant, the site of the world's worst nuclear disaster. Ukrainian officials say the staff is being held hostage, and the status of the site's nuclear waste storage facilities are unknown. I want to bring in former Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper. So first question is about Chernobyl. How dangerous a situation is it?
Well, it's very dangerous with Chernobyl, and we all recall the disaster that ensued in 1986. And there's the fact that it's the protective zone is in contest between the Ukrainian protective force and the Russians. I also worry about the 15 other nuclear reactors across, which are active across Ukraine in 4 different sites. If one of those is struck, either intentionally or not, and the Russians not known for their discriminate targeting, we could have a real disaster for not only for Ukraine, but the whole region, to include, ironically enough, Russia.
One of the storylines right now is the way Ukrainians are doing everything they can to fight back. They're begging the U.S. and other allies for help. Just from an intelligence point of view, what does that will to fight tell you, especially given the recent history? The Biden administration seemed to get that dynamic really wrong in Afghanistan.
We've always had a challenge gauging will to fight. During my war, Southeast Asia, we profoundly underestimated the will to fight of the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese. Fast forward 45 years, we profoundly underestimated the will to fight of the Taliban. There's a different situation here, and the assessment was ahead of time that the Ukrainians would fight, and what we're seeing, notably through great reporting from CNN, is they are standing and fighting, and inspiringly so. So in this case, I think we called the shot correctly.
When you were DNI back in 2014, that was when Russia annexed Crimea. It was also part of Ukraine before that. What's the difference between then and now when it comes to U.S. intelligence in the region?
I think I would offer 3 explanations real quickly. First, the Russians in 2014 were a lot more subtle. We had the little green men. In the case of Crimea, they already had 10,000 naval infantry on the Crimean Peninsula even before they started. The technology has improved dramatically, as we've seen by these really graphic overhead shots of Russian vehicles lined up stem to stern on these compounds across the border from Ukraine. And there is the realization 8 years later that we must engage in this information operations warfare competition. And intelligence is a crucial tool in doing that. So that to me are the reasons why the difference between what intelligence did in 2014 versus now.
Director Clapper, we have a whole lot more to talk about. You're going to be on with me Sunday on State of the Union, so we'll have a chance. I have a lot more questions for you. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan.
And up next, more on how the Ukrainian people are standing up to Russian aggression. Stay with us.
America has spoken. Dog is the #1 comedy in the country.
You're so scared. Smell it out big time.
It's the uplifting story we need right now.
No! You're just a demon!
Dog, rated PG-13. Now playing in theaters everywhere.
Okay, let's talk about those changes to your financial plan.
Bill? Mary?
Hey, it's our former broker, Carl.
Carl, say hi to Nina, our Schwab financial consultant.
I know how difficult these calls can be.
Not with Schwab. Nina made it easier to set up our financial plan.
We can check in on it anytime.
It changes when our goals change.
Planning can't be that easy.
Actually, it can be, Carl.
Look forward to planning with Schwab.
Staying up half the night searching for savings on your prescriptions? Just ask your CVS pharmacist. We search for savings for you, from coupons to lower cost options. Plus, earn up to $50 extra bucks rewards each year just for filling at CVS Pharmacy.
The Ukrainian people say they need more from the world, more than sanctions, more than boycotts, more than aid, and more than prayers. But while they wait for a level of help that may never come, we're witnessing a breathtaking resolve, people willing to face a nuclear superpower and do it on their own.
We just see a small group of people, and I'm hoping you can see them on our shot here, and they are kneeling and praying. Because right now there is truly a sense of having no idea what is coming down the pipeline.
Oh, I tell you what, I just heard a big bang right here behind me. I thought we shouldn't have done the live shot here. There are big explosions taking place in Kiev right now.
We are independent country, Ukraine, and we are totally not same as Russians.
and we don't want to be a part of Russia or any other country. It's really getting very emotional. And I cannot believe it's happening, really.
It's awful. You have to act, guys. You next. I mean, maybe not America, but Poland, other countries of Europe need to act immediately. It's not normal. Those people stand 7 hours with a baby on a border.
Ну, люди гибнут. Для чего? Люди мирные гибнут. Ну вот оно, вот, видите? Для чего это?
You seem remarkably strong, given how scary the situation is.
We try be brave because we have children and we don't want to show them that we are scared.
Andre, will you and your friends, under any circumstances, accept a Ukraine under Russian control?
Absolutely not. It's not going to happen. Listen, they can, let's just fantasize, achieve their short-term goals here. They can, but with a long-term goals, they're not going to survive here. They're just not welcome here in any household. Is going to fight against them.
Just in, a new audio recording has emerged purporting to show an exchange between Ukrainian soldiers on an island in the Black Sea and an officer of the Russian Navy.
Absolutely remarkable resolve by the Ukrainian people. That does it for me this hour. Please join me on Sunday for State of the Union. Among my guests, an exclusive interview with Jens Stoltenberg. He is the NATO Secretary General, and an exclusive interview with Utah Senator Mitt Romney. That and much, much more on Sunday. And stay with us right now. The news continues with Victor and Allison after a quick break.
With less moderate to severe eczema, why hide your skin if you can help heal your skin from within? Dupixent helps keep you one step ahead of eczema with clearer skin and less itch.
Hide my skin? Not me.
Don't use if you're allergic to Dupixent. Serious allergic reactions can occur that can be severe. Tell your doctor about new or worsening eye problems such as eye pain or vision changes, including blurred vision, joint aches and pain, or a parasitic infection. Don't change or stop asthma medicines without talking to your doctor. Ask your doctor about Dupixent.
When the hands that do the fixing need fixing, when the hands that do the caring need caring, that's a job for O'Keeffe's Working Hands. It's America's #1 selling hand cream and guaranteed relief for extremely dry, cracked hands. Also available in O'Keeffe's for healthy feet.
Penn Station East Coast Subs. It's all about good taste.
I did it! First flat point!
Get your first class free at Orange Theory.
is CNN Breaking News.
Hello, I'm Victor Blackwell. Welcome to CNN Newsroom.
And I'm Allison Camerata. We have two breaking news stories. First, Ukraine. Heavy fighting is reported on the main routes to Kiev. U.S. officials fear that Ukraine's capital city could fall to Russia within days. And any moment now, here in the U.S., President Biden is expected to announce his nominee to fill the upcoming Supreme Court vacancy.
CNN was the first to report his choice is Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, as she will also speak after the president's remarks. If confirmed, she will be the first black woman to serve on that court. Right now, she's a federal judge on D.C.'s Circuit Court of Appeals. And when CNN broke the news of the president's intention, she was actually in the middle of oral arguments for several cases. Let's talk more about this historic nomination while we wait for the president. We have CNN Chief National Affairs Correspondent Jeff Zeleny, CNN legal analyst and Supreme Court biographer Joan Biskupic, CNN Senior Political Correspondent Abby Phillip, and CNN Senior Legal Analyst Laura Coates, also CNN Chief Political Analyst Gloria Borger. Welcome to you all. Jeff, let me start with you with the decision. Why Judge Brown Jackson? And this is a very important introduction, both the experience and the personal narrative to the American people.
Victor, both of those are so important, and President Biden is going to appear in the Cross Hall of the White House, a spot that is reserved for historic and important moments like this one today. And this is coming 2 years to the day after Joe Biden, as a presidential candidate, said he wanted and indeed planned to make his first Supreme Court pick an African-American woman. He said he wanted to make history. He wanted to show the importance of that on the high court. So for the last year, we are told, the president in his off hours has been spending considerable time reading the writings and the opinions of several candidates. But from the beginning, Judge Jackson was one of the leading contenders, largely because of her breadth of experience. She's 51 years old, but she's been on the federal bench for nearly a decade, appointed in 2013 by former President Barack Obama, and she's risen through the ranks, being confirmed by the Senate 3 times, including just last year, and she garnered 3 Republican votes as well as all Democratic votes. But I'm also told it was the personal interview, the one-on-one conversation that she had with President Biden earlier this month, where things just happened to click. So this has been a decision in waiting, but it was not offered until last evening, I'm told. The president made a phone call to Judge Jackson. He extended the offer. She accepted the offer, but shrouded in so much secrecy, as you said. She went to her day job this morning and appeared on the Court of Appeals bench hearing just a routine case, but she will be in the White House with her family this afternoon. And then the confirmation process begins. Democrats would like to see her confirmed by the April recess. That's mid-April, Victor.
Before we get to that confirmation process, Joan, just tell us what we need to know about Judge Jackson. I mean, she's obviously very interesting. I've really enjoyed reading about her background, including that she was a public defender.
You know, that's right, Allison, and that's rare experience for this court. You'd have to go back all the way to 1967 when Thurgood Marshall was appointed. You know, the civil rights pioneer, worked a lot in criminal defense and all sorts of public defender type work. And she would be the only first person since then. She's also got the rare trial experience. So she's been in the trenches both for civil and criminal trials. Justice Sotomayor had some trial experience back in the 90s, but Judge Jackson would be our next appointee coming on with that sort of experience. So she's actually seen how Supreme Court rulings play out on the ground. So you have that. And then, as everybody's been saying about this moment, you know, it's been 233 years of the Supreme Court history, and the first time with an African-American woman. So, you know, you've got this really special perspective that she's bringing to the court, and I think that can make a difference, Allison, even though right now the court is very much entrenched in the 6-3 conservative liberal lock on this court. But I think that because of her unusual background, what she represents in terms of diversity, and also just how all the justices change a bit when a new justice comes on, I think we will probably start to see the influence of her once she's confirmed and on the bench. And one other thing I would like to say about the president's choice here, you know, he had to think about who he wanted for the court at this time, but also who he wanted for the court for the decades. If she lives to be as old as the man who she's succeeding, Justice Breyer, for whom she clerked, who is 83, she'd be on for more than 3 decades. So I think we have to take the long view as well as to look at how she could have an impact right now.
All right, we are just a few seconds out. Here we see President Biden coming in and there she is, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, who will be his nominee to the Supreme Court. Let's listen to the president.
Today, as we watch freedom and liberty under attack abroad, I'm here to fulfill my responsibilities under the Constitution to preserve freedom and liberty here in the United States of America. And it's my honor to introduce to the country a daughter of former public school teachers, a proven consensus builder, an accomplished lawyer, a distinguished jurist, on one of the nation's most prestigious courts. My nominee for the United States Supreme Court is Judge Ketanji Jackson. You know, 4 weeks ago, when a member of the court, a friend of mine, we used to work together in the Senate, Justice Stephen Breyer, announced his retirement, I said then, choosing someone to serve on the United States Supreme Court is one of the most serious constitutional responsibility a president has, and I mean it. I promised the process would be rigorous, that I would select a nominee worthy of Justice Breyer's legacy of excellence and decency. Someone extremely qualified, with a brilliant legal mind, with the utmost character and integrity, which are equally as important. And though I would bring this decision, my perspective as a lawyer, former constitutional law professor, chairman of the Judiciary Committee for many, many years, and I'm almost reluctant to say it, someone who's presided over more Supreme Court nominations than almost anyone living today, which makes me 28 years old. I started doing it when I was 32. And who has devoted much of my career to thinking about the Constitution and the role of the Supreme Court. With that perspective, I carefully studied the record of candidates. I've invited senators of both political parties to offer their ideas and points of view, and I've met with a number of them. As a result, because I truly respect not only the consent, I know they give consent, but it says the Constitution says advice and consent. And I sought the advice of Democrats and Republicans. I've consulted with leading legal scholars and lawyers, and I've been fortunate to have the advice of the Vice President Harris, and I mean this sincerely, an exceptional lawyer, a former Attorney General in California, and a former member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. And during this process, I look for someone who, like Justice Breyer, has a pragmatic understanding that the law must work for the American people. Someone who has historical perspective to understand that the Constitution is a resilient charter of liberty. Someone with the wisdom to appreciate that the Constitution protects certain inalienable rights, rights that fall within the most fundamental personal freedoms that our society recognizes. In the end, someone with extraordinary character will bring to the Supreme Court an independent mind, uncompromising integrity, and with a strong moral compass and the courage to stand up for what she thinks is right. For too long, our government, our courts, haven't looked like America. And I believe it's time that we have a court that reflects the full talents and greatness of our nation, with a nominee of extraordinary qualifications. And that we inspire all young people to believe that they can one day serve their country at the highest level. I've admired these traits of pragmatism, historical perspective, wisdom, character in the jurists nominated by Republican presidents as well as Democratic presidents. And today, I'm pleased to introduce to the American people a candidate who continues in this great tradition. Judge Jackson grew up in Miami, Florida. And by the way, the mayor of Miami, a Republican, endorsed you. I thought that was interesting. Her parents grew up with segregation, but never gave up hope that their children would enjoy the true promise of America. Her parents graduated from historic black colleges and became public school teachers. Her mom, a principal. Her dad, a teacher who later went back to school and became a lawyer representing that very school district, that school board. Judge Jackson describes finding her love for the law from an apartment complex at the University of Miami where her dad was attending law school. She'd draw in her coloring book at the dining room table next to her dad's law books. She grew up to be a star student, elected mayor of her junior high school and president of her high school class, where she was a standout. She was a standout on the speech and debate team. And it was after a debate tournament that took place at Harvard when she was in high school that she believed she could one day be a student there. There were those who told her she shouldn't set her sights too high, but she refused to accept limits others set for her. She did go on to Harvard undergraduate school, where she graduated magna cum laude. She went to attend Harvard Law School, where she was a top student and editor of the prestigious Law Review. Then she applied for a highly competitive and coveted clerkship on the United States Supreme Court, and she was selected. The justice who thought she was worthy of this high honor was a young lawyer, was none other than Justice Stephen Breyer, whose seat I'm nominating her to fill. Not only did she learn about being a judge from Justice Breyer himself, she saw the great rigor through which Justice Breyer approached his work. She learned from his willingness to work with colleagues with different viewpoints, critical qualities, in my view, for any Supreme Court justice. Now, years later, she steps up to fill Justice Breyer's place in the court with a uniquely accomplished and wide-ranging background. She served both in public service as a federal public defender, and in private law practice as an accomplished lawyer and with a prestigious law firm. If confirmed, she will join Justice Sotomayor as the only other member of the United States Supreme Court who has experience as a trial court judge, a critical qualification in my view, and once again, following the footsteps of her mentor, Justice Breyer, she'd become the only member of the court who previously served as a member of the United States Sentencing Commission. And she brings additional perspective to the court as well. She comes from a family of law enforcement, with her brother and uncles having served as police officers. That's one reason I expect by the Fraternal Order of Police, the national organization today, said, and I quote, "There's little doubt she has the temperament, the intellect, and the legal experience and family background have earned disappointment." And they went on to say, they're confident she will, quote, "approach her future cases with an open mind and treat issues related to law enforcement fairly and justly." Incredibly, Judge Jackson has already been confirmed by the United States Senate 3 times. First, to serve on the U.S. Sentencing Commission, a bipartisan independent commission I helped design to reduce the unwarranted disparities in sentencing and promote transparency and fairness in the criminal justice system. On the commission, Judge Jackson was known for working with Democrats and Republicans to find common ground on critical issues. Second, she was confirmed by the United States Senate with bipartisan support on the federal district court to administer justice with the special rigors and fairness that come with presiding over trials. And third, she was confirmed with bipartisan Senate vote to serve on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia, considered the second most powerful court behind the Supreme Court itself, and the court she once argued cases before as a distinguished advocate. And when Judge Jackson was nominated to the Circuit Court, one of his distinguished retired members, Judge Thomas Griffith, a former general counsel of Brigham Young University and a George Bush appointee to the court, said he backed her enthusiastically, hailing her exemplary legal career in both public and private practice. And he went on to say her careful approach as a trial court judge. Judge Jackson's service on the District Circuit Court, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, is another superb qualification for service on the Supreme Court. 3 of the current Supreme Court justices also served as the D.C. Circuit judges, where Judge Jackson now serves. Her opinions are always carefully reasoned, tethered to precedent, and demonstrate respect for how the law impacts everyday people. It doesn't mean she puts her thumb on the scale of justice one way or the other, but she understands the broader impact of her decisions. Whether it's cases addressing the rights of workers or government service, she cares about making sure that our democracy works for the American people. She listens. She looks people in the eye, lawyers, defendants, victims, and families. And she strives to ensure that everyone understands why she made a decision, what the law is and what it means to them. She strives to be fair, to get it right, to do justice. That's something all of us should remember, and it's something I've thought about throughout this process. As a matter of fact, I thought about it walking over here with her. One floor below, we have several displays celebrating Black History Month. One of them includes the judicial oath of office taken and signed by Justice Thurgood Marshall himself, an oath that will be once again administered to a distinguished American who will help write the next chapter in the history of the journey of America, a journey that Judge Jackson will take with her family. I hope I don't embarrass him, but her husband, Patrick, a surgeon, Dr. Patrick, stand up, let him see who you are. There you go. They met when they were undergraduate students at Harvard, and he's a distinguished cancer surgeon at Georgetown. And like so many women in this country, Judge Jackson is a working mom. She had her eldest child, Talia, when she was a private lawyer in practice. She had her second child
on the streets of Kiev for ordinary people.
Going to bed this evening, very nervous as this crisis continues.
And Charles, three main fronts with the Russians advancing from Ukraine's northern border with Belarus across the eastern frontier and then the south with the Crimea. You are in Dnipro. Can you just help us understand where that city stands in all of this?
Well, Dnipro, one of the reasons why we're here in Dnipro is because we wanted to get out and cross the river into basically west of the river Dnieper. That is of hugely strategic importance. We've even heard reports, the beginnings of whisperings, that the Ukrainians may be forced to actually destroying some of the bridges across this river. Again, we cannot confirm that. So this city is hugely significant, hugely important. If you looked at Dnipro in relation to Crimea, Crimea is further west. We heard also something that I meant to mention in the first answer. We heard reports of heavy fighting in and around the town of Kherson. We'd heard the bridge had been blown up, the bridge that basically would take you from Crimea into Kherson onto the Ukrainian mainland. We saw video of a lot of Russian forces there, heading, as I say, north towards and into Kherson, and also, as I say, heading east. And these are some of the forces that we would have seen today had we have continued along that road and had not to have obviously headed north to avoid them. So you've got Russian forces heading from the Crimea, heading east towards Mariupol. You have Russian forces heading down from Kharkiv, Russian forces surrounding the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, and of course these ongoing battles on the eastern side of the country around Donbass, the separatist-controlled areas. So Dnipro, if you like, it's still in the east of this country, but it sits a little bit higher up. And it's about an hour and a half's drive to this town, Zaporizhzhia, that we came through this evening. And that's where we're hearing reports of a potential evacuation there, and where we saw all those Ukrainian forces gathering to try and defend that city.
Thank you very much. Charles Stratford reporting to us from the city of Dnipro. Thank you, Charles. Well, in other developments, NATO is sending thousands of troops backed by land, air and sea to protect allies near Russia and Ukraine. Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg has called the crisis a new normal in European security. NATO's pledge of support came hours after the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky criticized both Western nations and the alliance for not coming to his country's aid.
It is a full invasion of Ukraine. They are moving towards Kiev, and the stated goal is to change the government of Ukraine. It is a very unpredictable situation. Therefore, I will not speculate, but I will pay my respect to the Ukrainian armed forces, which are really proving their bravery and their courage by fighting and standing up against the a much larger invading Russian force.
Our diplomatic editor, James Bays, joins us live now from Brussels. And, of course, James, Ukraine is not a member of NATO, but is there genuine concern there that the Russian military could cross NATO borders?
I think that's the reason that they're acting, or one of the reasons they're acting in the way they're acting, which is sending more resources to those countries on the eastern front of NATO, those that are closest to Russia. And we're seeing thousands more of troops. We've already seen many go in the last few weeks. In fact, 15,000 US troops in recent weeks, and the total number of US troops now in Europe, 90,000. But that's not just all they have. The NATO Secretary General making it clear they have 100 jets now on high alert, 120 ships in position in the region, ready to respond. It is, as you say, to protect those nations, those member states of NATO that are closest to Ukraine. They do not intend and will not, they say, deploy any of these assets, whether they are troops or air assets or any of the weapons, to Ukraine itself. But there is another reason for this, and I think it's to make President Putin feel the cost. One of the things repeatedly that he said he didn't like was NATO having an enhanced presence close to Russia, on Russia's doorstep. That's exactly, they say, what he's getting as a result of his actions.
So I suppose there's a risk then with NATO beefing up its defences on its eastern flank, as it has been doing for many weeks, that it will just antagonise the Russians even more.
Yes, and some of the other actions that have been taken, because this is something that's taking place not just with NATO. There's a great deal of coordination, I think, between these efforts. The NATO Secretary General was sitting in on the G7 meeting, which took place 24 hours ago. The EU Commission President was sitting in on the NATO meeting, and simultaneously the EU foreign ministers are taking another step. Their third round of sanctions in just 3 days, and this time personally they're going to sanction the assets of President Putin and of his foreign minister Sergei Lavrov. Certainly everyone here feels that this is a new position. The Secretary General himself said it was a new normal, and one NATO official said to me, a real step change. Perhaps you can look at the end of the Berlin Wall as one key moment, another key moment perhaps 9/11, but we're in another key defining moment, I think, and that's certainly how it's been described to me, of the West's relationship with Russia.
Thank you very much. Our diplomatic editor, James Bays, reporting from Brussels. Well, that's the reaction from NATO. I want to turn to the EU now, because the European Union is adding Russian President Vladimir Putin and his Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov to the bloc sanctions list because of the Ukraine invasion. EU's foreign policy chief says that they've also expanded the blacklist to include all members of the Duma who supported military aggression. Putin will join two other world leaders sanctioned by the EU, Syria's Bashar al-Assad and Belarus's Alexander Lukashenko. Meanwhile, Russia has responded, banning British airlines from landing at its airports and crossing its airspace. Moscow says the move is in response to an unfriendly decision by UK aviation authorities. On Thursday, Britain said Russia's national airline Aeroflot would no longer be allowed to land in the UK. The ban is part of a series of sanctions following those recent developments in Ukraine. Actually, I think we want to catch up on events in Washington now. Al Jazeera's Alan Fisher is following developments there. President Biden has been delivering remarks on a number of other issues, but what has he said about Ukraine, Alan?
Well, we know that he's had a conversation with President Zelensky in the last couple of hours. It lasted for 40 minutes. It was on a secure line. Of course, there were questions on Thursday about the whereabouts of President Zelensky. We know from Jen Psaki, the press secretary, that they are in contact with him, they are aware of his movements, and they are talking to him about security arrangements. Clearly, he sees himself as the number one target. He said that himself on Thursday night if the Russians were to take over Kyiv. And so the Americans and many others want to make sure that he is safe and he is secure. As far as continuing the operation of sanctions is concerned, we know that Joe Biden has been speaking to a number of allies. One of the big concerns, of course, is the use of the SWIFT banking system, which is a messaging system used since the 1970s to communicate financial transactions around the world. It has been stopped for one country in the past, that was Iran. A lot of pressure on them to do that to Russia now. The United States would be keen on that idea, but they keep talking about how sanctions need to be sustainable and coordinated, which means that every country has to be comfortable with what they're doing. And they're aware that there was a level of opposition from the Germans, although given what the finance minister has said in the last couple of hours, that seems to be easing. And he knows that the Italians aren't concerned, but there's still pressure coming from the White House to make that move. Now, there's also some conversations going on in Washington about how Joe Biden needs to do more. But one thing that the White House is saying is, like, look, you've got to make sure there is an element of gradation in any sanctions that are imposed. So these can be made much worse very quickly, targeting Sergei Lavrov and Vladimir Putin, for example, or they can be dialed back if they see there is some movement from the Russians. So they're still very much on the idea of making sure that sanctions are the main weapon, while continuing to reinforce NATO forces by sending an extra 7,000 men to Germany in the last 24 hours, that NATO countries feel secure and not under threat from any possible Russian aggression.
All right, thank you very much. Alan Fisher reporting to us from Washington. Well, let's go live to Ukraine now. Joining me is Maria Avdiivda, who is Research Director at the European Expert Association. She is actually in the city of Kharkiv, a strategically important city that has been targeted by the Russian military, hasn't it, Maria? And it has actually been subjected to missile strikes and reports of explosions. First of all, can you tell me what it's like there right now?
Yes, the challenge today started at 11 a.m. And continued during the day. And the most hard challenge were in the afternoon. And people are reporting that the missiles, Russian missiles, actually got into the streets inside the city. And after that, the explosions happened on the places where the ammunition is stored, the military ammunition. So now the city is all dark, all lights are off. People find some safe places in basement or use underground as a shelter. I myself just went there to check, and they are coming there with little children, and that's so heartbreaking to see, little Ukrainians hiding from Russian missiles and Russian shelling over there.
Tell us how they are coping. You say that, of course, there are civilians in the city. That means children, that means families. How are they dealing with this?
Well, everyone is very, very frightened. I mean, those who cannot take care of themselves, like women and children. And we also have reports that the missiles and Russian rockets have hit the kindergartens, nurseries, schools, and hospitals here in the city. And the fights goes on now on the outskirts of Kharkiv. Our military, they fight back fiercely, and also there is now the general mobilization in Ukraine and of course in the region, and the territorial defense units ask everyone who is capable of carrying weapons to come and stand with one another and fight back, so that we will not give Russian soldiers a chance to enter the city.
And what about the people that you know, friends, colleagues, acquaintances? Are they responding to that call? Are they acquiring weapons?
Yes, they do, and we have seen today, for example, in Kyiv, reported by the Ukrainian MOD, 17,000 weapons have been given to the hands of citizens who are ready to fight with weapons in their hands. And the same situation is in Kharkiv. So everyone so we feel that we are on our land and we are being under attack. We never threatened anyone. Ukraine always wanted to be in peace with all countries and with Russia as well. So we now being attacked with no reason, and that gives Ukrainian people the courage and the determination to stand here till the very end, because no one is going to leave our own homes and our land because that is where we were born and where we belong.
Do you think that President Zelensky should negotiate with Vladimir Putin?
President Zelensky have said that he is ready for any kind of diplomatic talks that will bring peace to Ukraine, because what he wanted and what he has always been speaking about is that everything what Ukraine wants is peace. We wanted peace in Donbass, and we now want peace in all over Ukraine. So Ukraine is ready for that. But what the demands that Putin is voicing about denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine, that's completely some kind of nonsense without any reason for it on the ground, because there are no Nazis in Ukraine. Ukraine is a peaceful state. We don't even have right-wing parties in the parliament. The president himself is a Jew. No Nazis are in Ukrainian government. So this, his demands are baseless, and that means that Putin is going to attack Ukraine as long as he can. But what he now sees is that Ukrainians are fighting back with that determination that Russia was not counting at. So probably that will move Putin to think twice, and probably at some moment he will decide, seeing the Ukrainian unity, the support from all other countries, the sanctions that are now being put into Russia. Probably he will decide and move his troops back.
Thank you, Maria Advievda, for joining us there. I do appreciate you taking the time from the city of Kharkiv.
Thank you.
Dozens of people have attended an anti-war protest in the Russian city of St. Petersburg. Scuffles broke out when police appeared to try and break up the rally and detain one of the protesters. On Thursday, hundreds of people taking part in similar rallies across Russia were arrested. And Russia says it's partially limiting the country's access to Facebook, accusing the US social media giant of censoring Russian media. Moscow's communications regulator says Facebook has ignored its demands to lift restrictions on 4 Russian media outlets. Let's go live to Al Jazeera's Bernard Smith. He's been reporting to us from Moscow. And perhaps one of the objectives with these restrictions on Facebook, or one of the questions is whether or not it will affect the ability to try and organize and mobilize protests.
Well, first of all, Facebook has said in response to the decision by the Russian telecoms communicator to slow down access, that's Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp and Messenger. Facebook says that what happened was it was ordered by the Russians to stop its independent fact-checking and labeling of content on 4 state-owned media websites. This includes a main Russian news agency and the Defense Ministry's channel. So what the Russians have done in retaliation is slow down access to Facebook-owned sites. But it is also true that in the last 24, 48 hours...
I mean, I guess Facebook's is it that popular in fucking Russia?
In Russia to post anti-war messages. Yes, there were those protests in St. Petersburg earlier. It's been quiet in Moscow this evening as far as we know, although a very heavy police presence, particularly around the Kremlin, but other ways of protesting through social media. Popular, and there's a belief that the Kremlin wants to sort of control or reduce people's ability to protest in that way.
You think? That's probably true.
Proposal to have talks in Belarus.
Vladimir Putin expressed interest initially in talks in Belarus, he says, because the Ukrainian president who'd called for the talks had indicated, according to the Kremlin, a willingness to discuss Ukraine's neutrality. Having said that, the Russian foreign minister, he'd already said, Sergei Lavrov, that the Ukrainians must be prepared to lay down their arms. Vladimir Putin has effectively called on the Ukraine army to overthrow Zelensky's government. And also Sergei Lavrov again, he said that he wants Ukrainian people to be independent and to have the possibility to freely define their destiny, but he sees no possibility of recognizing the current Ukrainian government as democratic. This is a Ukrainian government that was elected, President Zelensky elected with 73% of the vote in 2019. The Kremlin's problem, it seems, is with Zelensky. And while Putin on the one hand says he might be open to talks, on the other hand, he's calling for the Ukrainian military to overthrow its government.
All right, thank you very much. Bernard Smith in Moscow.
That would probably go the best, right? If they like overthrow the government themselves, then Putin could definitely set it up to justify everything.
Well, a look at our main story now. Continuing coverage of the situation in Ukraine. Russian forces closing in on Ukraine's capital, Kiev, on the second day of an invasion that's killed at least 137 Ukrainians and driven thousands from their homes. The Ukrainian military says Russian spies and saboteurs are on the outskirts of the capital, Kiev. Well, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is pushing for talks with Russia. He is offering to designate Ukraine as a country aligned with neither East nor West. But the Kremlin says it will only attend talks if they are held in Minsk, which is the capital of Belarus, from where thousands of Russian soldiers are crossing into Ukraine. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says that Russia's aim...
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think there should be like a more neutral place than Belarus, but whatever. Like, if you want to talk, like... Because, like, if that president walked into Belarus, wouldn't they just, like, they'd probably just arrest him, accuse him of war crimes, and been a Nazi, and end it right there, wouldn't they?
On the capital, Kiev, which is being pounded by missiles. Russian forces have also entered a northern suburb and surrounded the city. Fierce fighting is taking place in the regions of Sumy, Kherson, and Ukraine's second-largest city of Kharkiv, where the mayor has told all residents to hide in bomb shelters. And in the port city of Mariupol, close to rebel-held areas in the east, at least 35 residents have been injured after fighters backing pro-Russian separatists fired at civilian buildings. Well, a Ukrainian soldier is being praised as a hero for allowing himself to be killed to slow the advance of the Russian army. Vitaly Skakun was part of a team that was supposed to blow up a bridge. The bridge was mined, but with the Russians quickly approaching, there wasn't time to detonate remotely. Skakun radioed his unit to say he would do it remotely and wish them goodbye. Ukrainian cybersecurity officials of targeting military personnel. They say Ukrainian soldiers' accounts had been broken into using password-stealing emails before the same technique on people related to the soldiers. Ukraine has been inundated by cyber attacks since the Russian military build-up and invasion began. Well, for many in eastern Ukraine, this is an escalation of a conflict that's already been raging for 8 years. In the town of Hodlivka, which is controlled by Russian-backed separatists, people say shelling from the Ukrainian army has hit a secondary school. According to regional prosecutors, 2 people were killed. Shellfire has intensified in the rebel-held areas of Donetsk and Luhansk in recent months, ahead of their recognition as independent by the Russian President Vladimir Putin. That was on Monday.
We are fed up with this. It's been 8 years. How long can it continue? It has to end sometime. We are people too. We want to live. Putin won't let us down. He's a serious man and he stands for his words. So we will be fine. We hope for the best. And we think that Russia will make it. It's a strong country. They blockade us? So what? We lived through the Cold War in the Soviet Union. We survived.
Al Jazeera's Hoda Abdulhamid is in Kramatorsk in eastern Ukraine, and that's close to where government fighters have been fighting Russian-backed separatists. She explains what's happening in the region.
Well, I think to the surprise of everybody, the front line is more or less calm with ongoing shelling, but not continuous, quite sporadic, and certainly not a big onslaught, which is surprising many people here in the eastern part of the country, because if you recall, for the past few weeks we've been hearing all the time about the 100,000 plus troops that were amassed on the other side of the
I wonder how many of them people live in that region or like that.
Materialized, and that is actually also causing a lot of anxiety to people. They know it's going to happen at some point. They just don't know if it's just going to be a push of the separatists who are on the other side of that front line, or it's going to be the separatists with Russian army. The thinking is that the Ukrainian army that is positioned along that very long contact line, about 420 kilometers, is quite strong. These are the bravest units, the combat-ready units of the army. They are thought to be very well equipped. We saw today on the road some surface-to-air missiles heading in that direction. I can't tell you where, but they were certainly heading east from here. So it thought that really the separatists could not do that push alone. They would need some sort of military help from the Russians. People here are just wondering, when will that happen? They know that the end game would be to take over these two regions. That's what the separatists want. That's in their constitution. And that's what probably Russia would want, to have some sort of a buffer zone that is completely under their control, where really everything that's happening is ordered by Moscow.
Well, the United Nations.
I wonder how much,
5
like,
million people
I think Putin is using that, like, I'm rescuing these Russian people in, Ukraine. I think he's using that, like, as his reasoning to trying to seem like the good guy.
They're either trying to leave the city or seeking shelter below ground. Alexia O'Brien reports.
Chaos in Kiev as thousands jostle at the train station, desperate to leave the Ukrainian capital. Soldiers reportedly fired into the air to disperse the crowd.
We've been trying to leave all day from the morning, but as you can see, that's unrealistic.
Of course, it's got to be horrible if you're trying to leave.
Troops are edging closer, with explosions heard around the city. Earlier, this apartment block was hit.
I was sleeping, there was a sharp explosion, and I was thrown 3 meters from the room I was in into the corridor. The glass shattered, there were sounds coming from the street. I got scared and started crawling on the floor.
Oksana Gulenko made it out alive, while emergency workers went door to door searching for victims.
Where's this at? They didn't say where it was at. Kiev, or is that somewhere else?
Exhausted and uncertain about what's to come.
The shelter in our building is not as far underground as the metro station. That's why I think it's safer to come down here.
At least 100,000 people have been displaced by the fighting.
I mean, if I was Russia and I wanted to kill a bunch of people, I would watch this and find out where they're all hiding, and then I'd blow them up.
We had to leave behind everything, our whole life's work. It's a terrible feeling to leave your home. You can't do
yeah, I can't imagine.
These families have crossed the border into Hungary, hoping it won't be too long before they can return.
There are long queues at all the banks.
Is it hard to get it? I wonder if it's hard to get into Turkey. I mean, not Turkey, Hungary, I think, where they said they were going.
And even paying by card is not possible because some banks are not working. And there are hour-long queues at petrol stations.
They're probably going to run out of gas.
In Poland, hot food and drinks are being served.
Like at the, you know what I'm saying?
0 degrees Celsius. Some people walked 18 hours to get here, many with young children.
Jesus.
Facing what rights groups say are indiscriminate attacks by Russian forces. In Kiev, Oksana's daughter Katya sings the Ukrainian national anthem as she clears up after the attack. Despite the devastation, an air of defiance remains. Alexia O'Brien, Al Jazeera.
In the next hour, the UN Security Council was supposed to be meeting again to discuss the invasion of Ukraine, but we're now hearing it's been pushed back. Shabra Tansi is live for us at the United Nations. Now, what are they going to do when they actually meet?
Nothing.
Well, the US and Albania have introduced a resolution condemning the Russian action as a violation of the UN Charter, calling for an unconditional withdrawal of Russian troops. And what the US and Albania want is as much unanimity as possible on the Security Council. What they would want would be 13 votes in the affirmative, with a Chinese abstention and a Russian veto, because Russia's a permanent member of the Security Council. It's by no means a sure thing, though, as yet. From what we understand, first of all, China clearly has a much closer relationship to Russia, not least since the beginning of February, when Vladimir Putin and President Xi met and outlined in great detail the new security partnership that they have, specifically to challenge a unipolar world in which the US is able to do what it wants, but in their view has double standards when it comes to others. So we're not entirely.
I don't doubt that. We are the U.S. after all.
Whether they will abstain, which is what the U.S. would hope, or will actually join Russia in the veto, which would be a disaster, or at least would be not what the US wants. China has consistently said that although territorial integrity is very important to China, there are specific reasons or there are specific circumstances in this particular conflict, and Russia does have legitimate security concerns after NATO relentlessly expanded eastward. So that's something to watch. But then we have the other members of the UN Security Council, the non-permanent members. And what we were hearing in the last few days were there was a possibility of Brazil, of the UAE, of India abstaining. Certainly they've been very measured in their remarks in previous UN Security Council meetings this week and last week rather, and have been talking about legitimate strategic concerns, are calling for restraint. We understand Brazil has wavered and perhaps will be voting in the affirmative. That leaves.
Why does Brazil care? Do they have like I don't know if do they have association with Russia? I don't know.
That will not be what the US is looking for. So that's what we're looking for. And there
I know
awkwardness in the sense that Russia is the current president of the UN Security Council for February. So when they introduce the Security Council resolution, they will have to read out the list of countries who are co-sponsoring the resolution. And at our last count, it was around 59 countries across the UN sponsoring a resolution condemning Russian behavior, and the Russian ambassador will have to read each country out.
As you say, it's sort of adds to the sensitivity of the situation that Russia is president of that council, something which rotates. And so are there discussions underway about whether that should be challenged, and perhaps even if there will be efforts to remove Russia's right to having a permanent seat on the UN Security Council? Is there a feeling that the country is becoming more isolated?
No, I mean, you can see why there, of course, because the United States doesn't want any sort of precedent to be set where a permanent member of the UN Security Council can be challenged in such a way. What does that mean for all of the US's actions over the years? No, the last thing I think that's going to happen is any challenge to Russia's position on the Security Council, because those who are entrenched on the Security Council position would then look at their own behavior and think, well, wait a second, this could be problems for us too. So that's very unlikely. Any sort of reform of the Security Council has always been resisted by those who want the status quo to exist. So I think that's highly unlikely.
Thank you, Shab Ratansi at the United Nations. Well, Vladimir Putin's most useful ally so far has been Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. Tens of thousands of Russian troops have used Belarus as a launchpad to invade Ukraine and the capital Kiev now, which isn't far from the border. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has called Putin to express his support. Assad has been a staunch ally of Russia since it started bombing Syria's rebel-held areas in 2015, turning the tide of war in the government's favor. Russia's strongest allies in Latin America, Venezuela and Cuba, have blamed NATO for the crisis in Ukraine. They're calling for the conflict to be resolved peacefully. And Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro, who met Putin in Moscow just last week, has criticized his own vice president for condemning the invasion. Meanwhile, the Kremlin's most powerful ally, China, has refused to support sanctions against Russia. The invasion of Ukraine poses a challenge for China, which has refused to condemn the military action. Katrina Yu reports now from Beijing.
Less than a month after Chinese President Xi Jinping met Vladimir Putin, Russia's leader launched the most aggressive attack in Europe for decades. But China's leaders have refused to condemn the invasion, or use the word invasion at all.
The Ukrainian issue has other very complicated historical background. Today, it may not be what any of us want. So we hope that all parties will work together to give peace a chance.
China is criticizing both the United States for exacerbating tensions and NATO for ignoring what it says are Russia's legitimate security concerns. China also says sanctions are ineffective and only harm the general population.
China feels very strongly that the U.S. is trying to encircle it and contain it. Russia feels the same way. The combined pressure on both of them has pushed them together. And there's no question about that. So at this
Wouldn't it be nice if everybody just could be good and you wouldn't have to worry about everybody doing fucked up shit? Like, America acts like America doesn't do fucked up shit, right? China acts like they don't do fucked up shit. Russia acts like they don't do fucked up shit. Everybody does fucked up shit, you know? So it's kind of fucked up that everybody is on their high horse about everybody else's fucked up shit, like, you know? So fucked up.
That is simply unacceptable.
But this doesn't mean China condones Russia's attack on Ukraine. It also has good ties with Kiev and relies on strong trade with Europe. Beijing must balance its friendship with Moscow while maintaining relations with the West for the sake of its long-term economic...
China's got to have problems because, like, yeah, they want to have everybody being supporting and sending out all their shit for their economics, but then, of course, they know we don't, most of the West doesn't approve of how China runs their country, so it's a hit or miss situation.
Russian forces invaded Ukraine. 9 Chinese fighter jets entered Taiwan's air defense zone. Some analysts...
I think that's what we're looking for. That's what China... They're trying to see if maybe China can do... If China's going to do anything with Taiwan after all this.
Well, countries dependent on wheat and corn from Russia and Ukraine are preparing for global disruption. The two countries supply more than 25% of the world's wheat. Lebanon depends heavily on imports from Ukraine, which makes up 50 to 60% of its wheat market. The country's already grappling with its own financial...
I don't think we have to worry about that here in America. That corn, that's like our thing. Maybe we can sell out some corn to other people or something.
Prices started going up because shipping has become more expensive. There is fear. Wheat was between $370 and $400, and it went up to $410 during some weeks before the Ukraine crisis. If the situation escalates and the wheat market is halted, we have enough for about a month's worth of wheat stored in the mills, and after that we have no reserves. So it is important that we take this situation seriously.
It has a worldwide impact. They're kind of proving that regardless of whatever you think about right or wrong.
Dozens gathered outside NATO headquarters in Belgium, calling on the alliance to stop Vladimir Putin and end the war. In Taiwan.
Yeah, but they're not going to do that. Like, you can cry. Like, NATO's not going to do any, like, real... They're going to do the sanctions and shit, but they're not going to, like... They're not going to go into Ukraine and kick out Russia. That's just not going to happen. There would have to be some, like, unfathomable shit that happens. Like, they'd have to, like, show proof of, like, legitimate, like, torture. And I don't even know if they would do that. Like, you know, like, Russians just kidnapping kids and killing them on TikTok or some shit, you know? So
CPAC was founded by aggressive U.S. foreign policy hawks, people who wanted an interventionist strategy to the U.S. foreign policy, and that really changed after Trump. So back in 1974, then future President Ronald Reagan introduced John McCain to raucous applause. McCain had just returned as a prisoner of war in Vietnam, and that kind of interventionist approach was popular back then. But since Trump, he's had this notoriously close, some would say fawning relationship with Vladimir Putin, and has had a non-interventionist foreign policy when he was president. So
I'm sure a lot of people in the U.S. would support that too, because a lot of us are like, we're doing too much shit. And I can even see that, like, if we were, like, living the best country in the world, like, I guess some people believe that, but obviously we don't. We got people here suffering too, so.
Old Ukrainians taking up arms and fighting against Russia, and he said that that reminded him of the American Revolution. But we've had other people stand up at the podium and say most Americans couldn't pick out Kyiv on a map, that they should be more concerned with what's going on the U.S. southern border. And then, of course, there's the more extreme view of Donald Trump.
People don't seem to understand. You think even Trump would understand the world, like the world economy these days? It's not like it used to be, you know?
That it was savvy.
High-profile bodies in the sporting world are turning their backs on Russia. European football's governing body UEFA says it will relocate the Champions League final from Russia to France. The match was supposed to be held at Zenit St. Petersburg Stadium in May, with thousands of supporters expected to attend. Formula One has also cancelled the Russian Grand Prix, which was meant to be held in Sochi. Peter Stemmet reports.
The Champions League final is one of the biggest events on the global sporting calendar. Hosting the match brings prestige and tourism, among other benefits. Paris will now host this season's final after St. Petersburg was stripped of the honour by European football's governing body UEFA. They've also decided Russian and Ukrainian club and national teams are to play home games at neutral venues. FIFA will have to decide whether or not Russia's World Cup playoff in Moscow next month against Poland will go ahead as planned. FIFA has already spoken out against the conflict.
FIFA expresses hope for a rapid cessation of hostilities and for peace in Ukraine. FIFA condemns as well the use of force by Russia in Ukraine and any type of violence to resolve conflicts.
Meanwhile, Manchester United have cancelled their 10-year sponsorship deal with Russia's national airline Aeroflot. The airline had...
I was gonna say, why are you blaming it? Like, I think that's another, like in Russia, all the businesses in the country, they're the same. America, it's not like that, you know? So I think people have issues with that. Like, so they think, oh, this country just did that and that. Like, it's not how it works over here.
F1 drivers are backing the decision to boycott Russia.
Like everyone said, you know, innocent people losing their lives, you know, people losing their homes.
Yeah, but that's everywhere. Like, there were innocent people losing their lives before, so I'm sure. It's just, this is kind of a big deal, so everybody's talking about it. You know, because clearly, like, I don't believe there's no genocide, and I don't think the Ukraine is Nazis or whatever crazy-ass bullshit. But, like, clearly they have been fighting with these, like, I guess they would call them insurgents or separatists or whatever, but, like...
Andrei Rublev made clear his views on the matter after a win in Dubai on Friday. But unless there is a swift end to the conflict, more sporting events are postponed, cancelled, or moved to neutral venues. Peter Stemmet,
Hello.
Russia has also been banned from the upcoming Eurovision Song Contest, with the event's producer saying its inclusion would bring the competition into disrepute. The European Broadcasting Union says the ban is in light of the unprecedented crisis in Ukraine. It's also a U-turn in policy from the EBU. Just 24 hours ago, they said Russia would be allowed to compete. State broadcasters from Iceland, Norway and the Netherlands all called for that ban, with Finland saying that if Russia took part, it would not send contestants to the final of the Eurovision 2022. Well, that's it for now, but a recap of what is happening. There are fears about a battle for the Ukrainian capital, Kiev. There have been reports of Russian military, armored vehicles and troops advancing into the northern...
Do you mean, like, within my own country? Like, because people will say, oh, they're left, they're right. It's different from country to country, you know. I'd say I'm left of center. I'm not an insane lefty. I'm not an insane righty.
The streets are deserted. There is a great deal of traffic heading out.
A lot of people hate center people, though. I don't know, but to me it's the most logical. Because guess what? Some people are right on both sides about certain issues. Doesn't mean you're always right about everything.
Bullets and bombs are also tears shattering glass, suitcases on cobbled roads.
In general, I would be more liberal than I would be conservative. Like, I don't necessarily think everything that happened before was so great. I think we could get better, if you want to speak ideologically. How we get there, I don't know. Do I trust everything that we do? No. Do you mean, like, American football? Or do you mean, like, the rest of the world football, what we call soccer? Sorry. Just have to be specific about that. See, if you said real football to an American, they're going to say, like, NFL football. Now, to the rest of the world, I'm sure real football is what we would call soccer. With the round ball, or with, like, the egg-shaped ball there? The one where you actually do use your foot, or the one where you barely use your foot? I don't really have any kind of like team or anything like that. I watched it on occasion. I got into it a few years ago. I've never been like a super like, watching like anything like that. Like you also got to take I'm in America, so even though it's gotten a little more prominent over here, it's not like it is everywhere else. I think it was a World Cup or something a few years ago. I did get into watching it and liking it a little bit more. But I couldn't like tell you all the little specifics or anything like that. I don't hate it or anything. I played some FIFA like video game and I did not like the rule when I was playing the game sometimes. Now I don't know in reality that much about it. I know that like I scored some goals and they said I was offside and I got pissed while I was playing. So I'm not a fan of that. But I don't know in reality how that would affect anything.
Because I want to express my anger and my disagreement with the war that my country, Russia, has started. I'm a Russian citizen.
I'm glad that they have showed up. It is a little bit difficult to hear their language, but I'm happy that they're here, that they're speaking out. I just wish there were more of them.
People who are trying to protest in Russia, they are being arrested, they are being beaten by the police. You cannot protest in Russia against anything, especially against such things as the war in Ukraine that the government perceives as their kind of core policy.
If Putin will be in front of me, I won't tell him nothing because he doesn't deserve my words. He doesn't deserve to be respected. This is the dictator that should not be alive.
He really thinks of the
world. She's dead. Like, she's definitely got... She's... right after that, she got sent out to some gulag in, wherever, that cold place in Russia. She's done.
He will not succeed. Ukraine will live. Ukraine will live, and even if we fall today, tomorrow, if we fall, Ukraine will be.
Do you mean full on militarily? Do you mean like NATO wise? I don't expect that we're going to send any troops in unless anything crazy happens. Did I necessarily have a problem with NATO going in there? Not until now, because it did rile up Russia a lot more, so. I think Ukraine, like, if they wanted to join NATO, that's kind of their right as an independent nation. But I know there's a lot of things that I don't know about 100%, so there was agreements and stuff made before, but I think a lot of them's been broken on all kinds of sides, so I don't know.
Out the day across the platforms of NBC News. The news continues right now.
Right now, all the West's really doing to help is they're trying to come up with all these sanctions or whatever.
Hey everyone, I'm Allison Morris. You're watching NBC News Now. President Biden nominating Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Yeah, we got all kinds of stuff going on over here. Nominating Supreme Courts. Let's see. I'm really mostly...
This is a historic moment.
No, I'm really mostly focused on... They're probably not.
Ukraine's capital, Kiev, on the second day of an invasion that's killed at least 137 Ukrainians, driven thousands from their homes, and shocked the world.
All I've heard is, like, I guess they haven't reported on any kind of Russian deaths. All I've heard is numbers from Ukrainians.
Told residents to prepare Molotov cocktails to defend their city. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russian forces have marked him and his family as their top targets, but he's refusing to leave Kiev.
Why is he making like TikToks?
The president is here. Our troops are here.
I guess our old president ruined it. He'd like be tweeting them about everything. Now presidents are running in wars and they're like having a TikTok or some shit.
Glory to our heroes.
Well, Zelensky is pushing for talks with Russia, offering to designate Ukraine as a country aligned with neither East nor West. But the Kremlin says it will only attend talks if they happen in Minsk, which is the capital of Belarus, from where thousands of Russian soldiers are crossing into Ukraine. In the meantime, President Vladimir Putin has called on Ukrainian soldiers to seize power from their government. Paul Brennan begins our coverage now.
That's a smart move, though. If you can get the Ukrainians to take over for you, that would be a lot better, right?
Echo across the Ukrainian capital, Kiev. Russian advance elements are closing in on the city, although Western intelligence assessments indicate the bulk of the Russian force is still around 50 kilometers away. Volodymyr Zelensky's latest video address was bleak but defiant.
This morning we are defending our state alone, as we did yesterday. The world's most powerful forces are watching from afar. Did yesterday's sanctions convince Russia? We hear in our sky and see on our earth that this is not enough. Foreign troops are still trying to become more active in our territory. Russia will still have to talk to us sooner or later. Talk about how to end the fighting and stop this invasion. The sooner the conversation begins, the smaller Russia's losses will be.
But satellite still photos show massive Russian reinforcements waiting in reserve at various staging posts just across the border from Ukraine. Russia has the numbers stacked in its favor, and Vladimir Putin shows no sign of relenting. In a briefing to his Security Council,
that would be fun. That would be really ridiculous if they were waiting on help from Russia to beat Russia. Yeah, I don't see that there's going to be like any kind of there's not going to be any kind of military intervention. Like they're going with the all these restrictions and stuff. Maybe that'll help. Maybe it won't. I don't. In the meantime, it's not. I don't think they can keep up. They maybe should have. I don't know. It's hard. I mean, that's their country, so maybe they should have just like let that part, you know. Then, like the Donbass region, like what if they would have just let them be separatists, worked out some deal, moved out people that didn't want to be there. I mean, logistically, it would have been a nightmare, but it couldn't be nearly as bad as fighting a war against Russia. So,
minutes later, the entire garrison of 13 was wiped out by Russian bombardment. Russia says Ukrainian civilians need not be worried, but this civilian motorist would disagree. His car run over by a Russian personnel carrier, which appeared to deliberately target his vehicle. Remarkably, the man was pulled alive.
wow, goddamn.
For those who want to escape, time is running out. And Kiev's main railway
I was in a car crash, and I didn't get out that easily. But I didn't get run over by a fucking tank.
The exodus is regularly interrupted.
Well, no matter what they say, like anytime there's like war, there's going to be some civilian casualties. You're fighting in a very, very metropolitan areas and stuff. You know what I'm saying? You're not fighting in like the jungles of like Vietnam and shit like back in the day. And even back then, I mean, there were people living there, so they were still civilian. There's always going to be civilian casualties. So don't be pretending like that. I mean, maybe he means they're going to go in and mow down civilians or whatever, right? But yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, I don't know, maybe Ukraine should have looked into it more before they let this go. I don't know. I guess it's also, if you want to think, like, if it's kind of like the old adage, like, right? If you keep getting bullied and bullied and bullied, like, I guess you have to stand up for yourself sometimes, regardless, or they're just going to keep on. Because, I mean, Russia's been fucking with Ukraine for a long time. It's not the only time, right? So, you know, they annexed Crimea, and then they installed their own government in, like, what, 2008, 2006, or whatever, that, you know, so it's definitely fucked up.
cope, but really we are just struggling by getting stuck in here. That's the thing that we can't escape at the moment. We're just trapped, to be honest.
And what do you think about the whole invasion and the way that?
Well, I'm sure she's not all loving of it.
Terrible. It's just not inappropriate. Any civil laws or whatever.
And what are your views towards Vladimir Putin and the sort of things that he's doing and saying?
Say it again.
What about Vladimir Putin? What do you think about what he's doing and saying?
Just mostly lying to the Russians, invading, just breaking international laws.
Are you scared?
We're quite, we overtook our fear during Maidan in 2012. And yeah, it's unpredictable. That's the thing.
I guess I would be scared if they were like blowing up shit around me, That's something I'll never understand. I've never been anywhere like that where there's like,
were you aware that tanks are getting closer? And the columns.
Yeah, we know that. Yeah.
What are you going to do?
Stay here, the most safe place at the moment.
You're spending a lot of time in this shelter, are you?
Yeah. 2 nights in a row.
And what about your son? You must be.
Ask him. You can ask him.
Right. How are you feeling towards this? Are you hopeful?
Well, I'm scared and I'm also hopeful that we'll have a bright future.
Goddamn, you sure as hell couldn't find a little American kid that could speak another language like that. I guarantee you that. Like, if they showed up, sure as fuck not speaking. Let's even go with Spanish, since Spanish would be a close, Like, I wasn't going to walk in and talk to a little kid in Spanish, and he's going to know.
Young man there. Good luck to you both, I hope.
Looks like he might want to comb his hair, though, but I mean, you're in the middle of a war, so you can't expect too much, right?
Capital Kiev, and Al Jazeera's Charles Stratford traveled from the country's east to Dnipro in central Ukraine, and he describes what he saw while he was crossing through multiple conflict zones.
We started in Mariupol, that very important strategic coastal city, naval port on the Azov Sea in the southeast. There was heavy shelling there to the east of the city. We understand tanks being used there. Mariupol mayor offering people the chance to get out of the city, to be evacuated. Him describing there being saboteurs there as well. The situation very worrying in the southeast. We moved west towards another port city, Berdansk. We had heard earlier, a couple of days earlier, that the naval base there, the personnel from the naval base had actually fled. And indeed, when we arrived, that was indeed the case. There was no naval personnel on the base. One security guard saying that they had all left, confirmed that. We spoke to our source and said, he told us that the reason they'd gone was because the Russian forces were threatening to shell the base and indeed the city if they didn't leave. We left Berdansk and continued heading west towards the town of Melitopol, where there had been reports of heavy fighting. Indeed, videos started appearing of heavy fighting in that city as we approached. The road got increasingly quiet. We passed a number of Ukrainian military vehicles still smoking from what we understand could well have been just precision attacks, possibly using drones. We have no way of confirming.
I was being invaded. Somebody had a ladder outside.
As the road got quieter, we stopped off at a village and spoke to a family in this village. They were getting ready to go. They'd been in contact with people in a village further up the road between us and Melitopol, and they said that there was a convoy of Russian tanks heading our way. So we started crossing country, passing more burnt out Ukrainian military vehicles, eventually running into columns of Ukrainian soldiers, some of them withdrawing from Melitopol, at which stage they told us that the city had fallen, or the town had fallen to Russian hands. They were most insistent that we keep heading as quickly as we could north. On the way, we passed cruise missiles, tanks, many infantrymen, very, very nervous, big groups of Ukrainian infantry getting ready to defend the city of Zaporizhzhia. Interestingly, in the last few minutes, we're getting reports of the authorities there potentially trying to set up some sort of evacuation from Zaporizhzhia. And indeed, in the last few
Oh, okay. They're talking about it on CNN again.
Refugees who are heading west and trying to head for those borders, Moldova, Hungary, Poland. It is hard to comprehend, and we are just starting to see it. Let's go to Nick Payton-Walsh. She is in the port city of Kherson tonight. Nick, you have seen a lot of what's happening, some of the Ukrainian tactics in fighting back. Tell us what you saw today.
Well, importantly, Erin, it seems as though tonight we have seen another change of hands of control of the bridge on the edge of the city and essentially the city's defences. An announcement has gone out on Facebook from local officials here which suggests that the city's defences have in fact fallen. Now that did happen last night when the Russians appear to have crossed the bridge on the edge of the city into town. They got pushed back in the night and in the morning, and we went down to the bridge in the morning to see that the Ukrainians were controlling it again. But there's been intense fire for much of the day. Grad rockets launched, impacting around this town, artillery as well. We were down at the bridge at dusk and there were shells flying over our heads, landing in the nearby villages and near what must have been Ukrainian positions, and then a very acute, awful sound. An attack helicopter coming in, fired multiple rockets, a lot of heavy gunfire, and then silence. Shortly followed by what we think is this legitimate statement from a local official. We haven't been able to interview him ourselves, but it appears that there's some acceptance that there's been another change in who controls that bridge.
It says 137 Ukrainian soldiers. I wonder if that's if there have been any reports of like
2014 and then up to,
you know what I'm saying, like death or whatever.
Pour more forces towards the capital. Russia needs to control that bridge. They did last night. They probably do tonight. We haven't been over there to see it ourselves. But now this is the consequence, essentially, of a rampaging, sophisticated military blast.
Political needs, but I wouldn't want to characterize it beyond that. Yes.
President Zelensky also made an appeal for a no-fly zone. Is any consideration being given to that?
Oh, okay. I put that on there because I thought maybe people would follow instead, or if they were gonna bother to say anything. Yeah, we're keeping that going. All right, I forgot. No, I'm talking about that. That's the stuff I should be caring about, but let's see. Shit. Looks like nothing new is happening, so.
To change the government of Ukraine. It is a very unpredictable situation. Therefore, I will not speculate, but I will pay my respect to the Ukrainian armed
Sanctions
forces.
by themselves are not going to get Putin to turn around the tanks, let's be clear. The US, EU, UK sanctions supported by Asian democracies can hurt the economy of Putin's Russia, so he has fewer resources to commit future.
Lord, somebody should have set this guy up with a microphone or something. He's terrible audio.
To do? Well, at the moment, what I'm hearing from Ukrainian friends is that they need more anti-tank weapons, more javelins. It's hard to get them there under these conditions, but we need to help Ukraine immediately. The sanctions, however, especially if we keep increasing them, and I think we should. I think we haven't reached the maximum
I
yet.
mean, this guy's probably a better expert than I am, but there's no way we're going to do this shit.
Those things have a way, sanctions have a way of adding up over time. Russians don't seem very happy with Mr. Putin's war against his neighbor. And we, the free world, need to make sure that price rises. Now, I'm glad the Europeans have, apparently they've sanctioned Putin and Lavrov, the foreign minister. I'd like to see the Biden administration follow suit today. That would be great. There are other things the Biden administration can do. But the sanctions we've announced this week are strong. The trouble is, even strong sanctions won't turn around Putin's tanks.
Ambassador, Russia is offering to meet with Ukrainian representatives in Belarus. Now, for those of us at home who do not have your diplomatic experience, it is really hard to imagine a meeting like that happening right now while Ukraine is under attack. What do you make of that offer, and how could a meeting like that actually work?
Last night, Ukraine's President Zelensky offered to discuss a ceasefire. He even offered to discuss Ukraine's neutrality. The trouble is, the Russians have offered Minsk as a venue. Minsk is the capital of Belarus. Belarus is joining in the attack by allowing Russian troops to launch attacks from its territory.
True.
They're part of the problem. Secondly, the Russian demands are for Ukraine's demilitarization and, get this, denazification. There are no Nazis in the Ukrainian government. The president of Ukraine is Jewish. Ukrainian Jewish community supports Ukraine's independence. This is nonsense. The Russians don't seem interested in a diplomatic settlement even now. They seem interested in total surrender. What denazification really means is the Kremlin gets to throw out anybody in Ukraine's leadership who's too pro-European, too pro-democratic, and replace them with stooges. Ukraine...
I think, like we don't understand, because it's totally different reason behind, they call it, because, they're like, Nazis are like the boogeyman of Russia. Like, they literally invaded, I don't know how many people still remember that were alive then, but I imagine that some people that are still alive remember the people that were alive telling them about what the Nazis did. Because they came in and they did horrible shit when they went to invade Russia. Originally, Russia had signed was it a non-aggression pact with Nazi Germany at one point before Hitler's but then he broke that and went in and started going in. That's why they ended up allying with us so we could take out Hitler in the long run, right? So, but to what most of the rest of the world, they think about Hitler, they think about like Nazis as in killing Jews and all of that shit, right? So I don't know if their definition's the same, right? Or they view Russians being killed, they would kill Russians like they killed Jews, right? I don't know if it's the same as how we see it, and I think that's where he's trying to conflate that idea that because they're having I don't know, is Russian, would they be ethnic Russian, culturally Russian? The people that are in the Donbass region, you know, or pro-Russian. So I think they're saying because they're fighting with Ukraine that makes them Nazis by default because they would attack Russians for just being Russian. That's my take on it. Like, obviously I don't know, and I'm not fucking, you know, I don't know fucking expert, but
sharp line. But that still leaves Ukraine on the wrong side of that sharp line. No, we're not going to get into a shooting war with Russia. Russia wants to frighten us. Putin threatened nuclear war, just like Khrushchev used to do in the old Soviet period. But we shouldn't fall for that. There are still ways we can help Ukraine. Putin is a master of political tactics, intimidation, and killing. But democracies have advantages if we remember them. And there are lots of things we can do to help Ukraine still. Weapons, a long-term support for their freedom, even if Putin succeeds and Ukraine becomes a captive nation under Kremlin control. That will not.
I don't know if that's going to happen. That seems like it's going to be a lot. I think if he can get them to, like, legitimately annex, like, it'll come out as a win for him, you know, and it'll make, like, NATO step back, and it also make, like, you know what I'm saying? So I think that might be what he's going for. I don't know. Are we going to actually, when I say we, I mean, like, not necessarily America, but, like, any Western nation. Are we going to, you know, make, you know, realistically, like, give them weapons? You know? I don't know. That could be kind of a little bit more. I guess it's different. I don't know enough to know about the law, what's worse versus the other. But yeah, other than that, I'm not saying anything new right now, so I think I'm going to call it. I'm not going to just go on and on and on and on for the whole day. Like, if something, you know, I'm not Hassan. Like, I'm just like, well, clearly, I'm nowhere near as pretty. But, like, the fucking, you know, like, where I'm just going to be streaming about it. Like, 'cause I'm just talking to myself at this point, too.